Yes, the New Orleans Saints do need to prioritize offensive line in this year's NFL draft, but at the same time, they need to be ready for a potential tumble out of the top 10. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we've got 3 mock drafts for you. Okay, technically 2 mock drafts and another that I participated in that I want to fill you in on. We're going to be taking a look at the New Orleans Saints potentially trading out of the 5th round and even getting as far as into the top 100, including, of course, some leveraging of next year's draft picks. We're also going to take a look at a mock draft led off by Georgia tight end Brock Bowers, a type of mock that I've never done here on the show before, but I want to do for you. And to kick everything off here, we're going to take a look at how the New Orleans Saints, yes, need to prioritize offensive line in this year's draft, but they need to be ready to capitalize on a potential fall out of the top 10 for a prime candidate as well. How can they take advantage of that and still build their offensive line? We got answers for you on today's episodes. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day here on Locked On Saints, and of course, being an everydayer. Don't forget, we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's a new promo code, LOCKEDONNFL, for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So on today's episode, I want to take a look at a mock draft that I was a part of, participating in, thanks to Raider Nation Radio, my good friend, your boy Q, over at Locked On Raiders, who of course is one of the ESPN radio hosts and also Raider Nation radio host, had me on for the second year in a row to take part in the Raider Nation Radio Ultimate Mock Draft. And as a part of that, at pick 14, no trades in this draft, I was able to take advantage of a big time fall for a big time prospect. So I want to talk through a little bit about how that all came together, why it's possible that something like this does happen IRL in real life, and also what the New Orleans Saints should do about it. Because look, you can't draft, or you shouldn't be drafting strictly based upon position. Do the New Orleans Saints need to prioritize offensive line in the draft? Yes. Does that mean they have to take one at 14? Not necessarily. Remember that the Saints also still have pick 45, where they can land a guy like Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU, Patrick Paul out of University of Houston. They could also go with, of course, Kieran Namageji out of Yale. So there's a lot of different ways the New Orleans Saints could go in terms of still addressing their offensive tackle and offensive line needs, even without taking one at pick 14. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. So as a part of this mock draft, the way that Raider Nation Radio kind of does this is that they bring in team experts, team insiders, beat reporters, all that, to make selections for the team that they cover or a team that they're very, very familiar with. And so as we go through, they bring us on, we make the selection, we get the updated, here's what the mock draft was, all that other stuff. So here's a selection that I made at pick 14. And mind you, Ole Fashanu, the offensive lineman, the offensive tackle out of Penn State, was on the board. Troy Fautanu, out of Washington, the versatile offensive lineman that could be your left tackle, your right tackle, your left guard, your right guard, wherever it is that you need him to be. He was still on the board. Taliese Fuaga, the offensive lineman that could be your left tackle or right tackle out of Oregon State, still on the board. So why didn't I take any of those 3 players? Well, it's simple. Because Alabama edge rusher Dallas Turner was still on the board. And mind you, this is not just some Pro Football Focus mock draft simulator, Pro Football Network mock draft simulator, the computer screwed up kind of a thing. These were all human beings making these selections as this mock draft rolled along. Now, I don't usually do this because I think it's kind of boring, but I do want to go through what the first 13 selections are. I won't spend a lot of time going through it, but I do want to just kind of give you an idea of how this came to be to where I was able to draft Dallas Turner at 14, the edge rusher out of Alabama. Why draft him? Because he's disruptive. He brings speed to your defense. He adds a fearsome element to your defense, something that your defense very much needs going into 2024 and could be a cornerstone of your defense for the foreseeable future. This is a guy that goes whose opportunities go well beyond the 4 years of his rookie deal. You get the 5th-year option, drafting him in the first round, and absolutely a guy that you're going to try to bring back on a second contract, on a third contract, all of that. This is a player that has the ability to be a Micah Parsons-like type player, not be Micah Parsons, but have that kind of impact on your team. So let's talk about how we got here, make some adjustments based upon what we think are actually going to happen in this year's draft, and then we kind of get an understanding of why this is something that the New Orleans Saints need to be ready for, because it might not be Dallas Turner at 14. It could be some other prime draft prospect that falls outside of the top 10 and lands with New Orleans. They have to be ready to make that selection and then have to be ready to still address their offensive line at later points. Pick 45 in the 5th round, a guy like Javon Foster out of Missouri. Easy way to go about that. We talked about Nathan Thomas, the Ragin' Cajun, later on in the draft. There's a lot of different ways for them to still be able to address their offensive line, even if they don't take one in the first round. So here's how we got here. First overall selection. Remember, no trades in this situation, but we'll talk about if there were trades, why this could still happen. Pick 1 overall was, of course, Caleb Williams to Chicago. No surprise there. Followed up by Jaden Daniels to the Washington Commanders. Drake May, the quarterback out of North Carolina, to the New England Patriots. So there's 3 quarterbacks out of the top 3, 1, 2, 3. That's exactly what we expect will happen. Here's where things are a little bit different than we expect for them to happen. The Arizona Cardinals in this mock draft selected at 4. This is still possible. The Arizona Cardinals still might decide that, hey, you know what, getting those extra first round picks and everything like that, it's not really that helpful. Or maybe Minnesota's not really wanting to come off as much as what Arizona actually wants. They might say, whatever, we'll stick and pick at 4, you get the best player in this year's draft and wide receiver Marvin Harrison out of Ohio State. That's what happened here. Okay. Now, if the Minnesota Vikings were to trade their next 2 first-round picks, as well as the 2 first-round picks in this year's draft, 11 and 23, they're moving up to 4. They're not taking Dallas Turner. They're taking a quarterback. They're taking J.J. McCarthy in this case. So up next for the next selection in this mock draft, the New York Giants selected J.J. McCarthy. If J.J. McCarthy wasn't on the board, they're probably taking a wide receiver. So you just flip the 2 selections. Not a big deal. Okay. So we still see how even with a trade up to 4, how Dallas Turner could still make his way out of the top 6. Right? We're all aligned on that. Okay, great. Pick 7, chalk, right? Super chalky. We all know that it's going to happen. This is what we believe is going to happen. Notre Dame offensive tackle Joe Alt to the Tennessee Titans. Nothing there. Here's where things get interesting. Pick 8 overall, the Atlanta Falcons did not select Dallas Turner, but they did go edge. They went Leatu Latu, the edge rusher out of UCLA. These are the types of selections that happen in the NFL draft all the time. They know that they need an edge rusher, that they need this position, but maybe the guy that's the number 1 guy isn't the best fit for their system when the number 2 guy is. That's what happened here. Leatu Latu at 8 to the Atlanta Falcons. The Chicago Bears turn around and grabbed Washington wide receiver Roma Dunze. Then you get to the New York Jets, who took Brock Bowers, the Georgia tight end. That's another chalky selection, one that we see a lot. Then here in this draft at 11, the Minnesota Vikings were still on the board, right? Because they didn't trade up. They took Penn State edge rusher Chop Robinson, and this just wasn't anybody. This was Luke Braun, the host of Locked On Vikings, who might have just been trying to do me a favor, even though he didn't talk to me about it ahead of time. But he's the one that took Chop Robinson at 11 over Dallas Turner. Maybe that's something that a lot of other people see as well. But even if that were the case, if the Minnesota Vikings were to have traded up, that would be the Arizona Cardinals. At 11, they're more likely to take a Quinyon Mitchell or a Kool-Aid McKinstry or a Terrion Arnold, a cornerback at 11, than they are to take an edge rusher. Boom. So then you get to the Denver Broncos at 12, who could take an edge rusher, maybe, or could go with Michael Penix Jr., which is what they do in this draft. Maybe they go for Bo Nix in real life. They go for the quarterback there. At 13, the Las Vegas Raiders, they need an offensive lineman. They go with J.C. Latham, and bam, Dallas Turner's right there at number 14. It's not as out of the ordinary as I think that some people think that it is. And even if it's not Dallas Turner, the New Orleans Saints need to ready themselves for a top prospect, a top player at their respective position to potentially fall to them at 14, be ready to take that player, and then have another plan to address their offensive line in the draft. And there are ways to do that. If I were to make this selection, which is what I did in that mock draft, but then I wanted to move along with that mock draft at 45, it's a prime place for me to take a Patrick Paul out of Houston or a Kingsley Suamataia out of out of Suamataia out of BYU. I mean, there's a lot of different ways for me to go here. I mentioned Kieran Namageji as well. I could also, in the second round, go with a wide receiver like Xavier Legette out of University of South Carolina. And then I could wait all the way into the 5th round if I wanted to take a Javon Foster, or I could trade up if I wanted to for somebody else, the offensive tackle out of Texas, Jones. I could take him too. There's a lot of different ways for me to go here. So the New Orleans Saints, yes, need to prioritize offensive line. However, be ready just in case a prime prospect falls to you at 14. You don't have to select an offensive tackle just because they're an offensive tackle at 14. You can wait. It is a deep position in this year's draft, and that could work in the favor of an opportunity like this. Another potential player that could drop and be available at 14 that's at the top of their position group is Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. I'm anti-tight end in the first round, but let's take a look at it. What happens if they do go that route? Can they continue to build the rest of the positions that of which they're in need? The quick answer is yes. Let's break it down coming up next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. I remember one time I was trying to buy a ticket. I was out of town. I'd never really get the opportunity to go to MLB games and things like that. It was the MLB season. I was in a baseball city. I wanted to go out and grab some tickets and go. And then the date or the tickets and the last minute deals, there were no last minute deals. All the prices got jacked up. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to do it. That was in Chicago. I wanted to go to a Cubs game, wanted to go to Soldier Field, wanted to have that experience. And I got priced out of it. Now, that'll never happen again. Thanks to my friends over at Game Time, because Game Time's got last minute deals all throughout the MLB season, the NBA season, the NFL season. When it rolls around, they got them for you. A lot of folks save up to 60% in buying tickets to their favorite sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. at the last minute. That didn't used to be the case. Now it is always the case over at Game Time. Let them take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL. New promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. Look, I might be anti-tight end in the first round, but that doesn't mean that the New Orleans Saints are too. So let's break down what a mock draft could potentially look like for the New Orleans Saints if they take Georgia tight end Brock Bowers at number 14 in the first round. We appreciate you very much as always. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. For your second listen, make sure you go on and check out Locked On Sports Today. The 24/7 stream is the first of its kind when it comes to national sports 24/7 streams on YouTube. So if you're tired of watching all of the debate theatrics, all the arguments and things like that, people just shouting at each other without talking actual ball, go and check out Locked On Sports Today to get the most intimate knowledge you're going to find on your favorite teams and all of the biggest stories from around the world of sports. You can find on the Locked On Sports Today stream on YouTube, as well as the free Amazon TV channels app. All right, so I wanted to take a look at a mock draft here where the New Orleans Saints select Brock Bowers to start off this draft, right? Because I've been pretty openly kind of anti-tight end, not even kind of, I'm very anti-tight end in the first round. My reasoning behind that is because of the fact that tight end takes a very long time to transition to when it comes to the NFL. It takes 2-3 years for most guys to do that. Now, there are the exceptions, there are the outliers where that's not the case. However, those are few and far between. That's why they're exceptions. That's why they're outliers. That's why they're special. Now, Brock Bowers as a prospect is absolutely special, but we're talking, for me, a second round guy purely based on position. However, the New Orleans Saints might not see it that way. As we just mentioned, you have to be ready for a player at the top of their position group to fall to you at 14. And one guy that could potentially happen with is absolutely Brock Bowers. So let's take a look at what a mock draft might look like in that case. And don't worry, we're still going to trade up to the top 100 to make an additional selection as well, because I do want to explore that. So at pick 14, I took Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia, right? Big guy, massively athletic. He's a tight end by position designation, but maybe more of just a playmaker by trait. He's one of these guys that kind of gives you the ability to line him up in line, line him up in the slot, put him out wide. You could probably run him out of the backfield if you want to, and he can get you yards after catch too. So there's no end to the good that a Brock Bowers can bring you. The biggest question is, can he bring it to you immediately? And that's where the sort of luxury pick issue comes in. Would he be a luxury pick? Potentially. But if you can get what you needed out of him immediately, then he's nothing but value. Can this coaching staff do that? That would have to be proven. However, Clancy Barone, again, one of the better tight end coaches, not just in today's game, but in the history of the NFL. So giving him a guy like Brock Bowers could make a ton of sense, and he would pair well or group well with guys like Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson. So we're taking him at 14. At pick 45, I wanted to go edge here to push offensive tackle back a little bit more so I can show you how you really can still continue to address this later on in the draft. So at pick 45, I went with edge rusher Chris Braswell out of Alabama. He's somebody that gives you good size, 6'3", 250-ish pounds. So you'd like to see him probably bulk up a little bit, but he's one of those guys where even if he doesn't put on the weight, he's going to be a good starter in the NFL, especially if he's a part of a rotation and he would get an opportunity to be a part of a rotation. You can kind of move him around a little bit too, which is really nice. Then I traded a future third, next year's, picks 168, 170, and 199. So 2 fifths and a sixth, and then a future third to move up all the way to pick 81. Okay. Usually when I do these types of like mock draft trades out of 5, I'm moving to like the 120s or something like that. Not this time. I went ahead and moved all the way up to the 80s so I could make sure that I got a prospect that I really liked. And I had 2 big options here. Okay. Michael Hall Jr., the defensive tackle out of the Ohio State University, or Malachi Corley, the wide receiver out of Western Kentucky University. Either one of those guys would be a fantastic selection at 81. The one that makes the most sense value-wise at 81 is Malachi Corley, so that's why I went with. But if the Saints were to do a lesser trade and send less to move up to 120, and then, or even just to 100 or 103, 104, kind of like they did last year, they moved up to the first selection of the 4th round and then taken Michael Hall, big win right there too. At pick 150, which I kept in the 5th round, I didn't have to do my usual 150 selection, which was Theo Johnson. I've already got Brock Bowers. So I went with Javon Foster, the offensive tackle out of Missouri. So here we go. We're still addressing offensive line. This is a guy that still could be starter quality in the league. This is a guy that has a lot of experience in the zone run and that helped to put together a really, really nice season for Missouri last year in the SEC. At pick 175 in the 5th round, I went with cornerback Terheeb Still. He's just one of those guys that's going to be able to develop. That's really disruptive. He can move around. You could do a lot of different things with him as well. You can play in the slot and outside. He's got good size, all these good stuff. Just good toolsy cornerback to have. Didn't need to take another offensive lineman here. Maybe could have gone defensive tackle if there was maybe an interior defender that I really liked in this area. There's an LSU one that's going to be hanging around this spot that could potentially work for them. But I went ahead and I went with Terheeb Still because I still think that building up that secondary makes a lot of sense for New Orleans. At pick 190, my 1 6th-round selection, because I traded the other one in order to be able to get up for Malachi Corley there, I went with Nathan Thomas, the tackle out of Louisiana. Now, I can also move him around. He can play outside, he can play inside, move him in the guard, all these other things. Just do it immediately. Like, make that decision immediately. That way he's got the opportunity to learn the position. And then finally, Katana Ladapo, the the Oregon State safety who can play in the box, you can move him into the slot. He can play a little bit, in the split safety roles and all those other things as well. That was at pick 239 in the 7th round. So I get my box safety still in that point. So whether you like the wide receiver or the defensive tackle at 81, either way, you're filling out everything else, right? I got 2 offensive linemen here. I got a couple of guys to help shore up my secondary. I didn't need to go linebacker as much because New Orleans has done a lot of that over in free agency. I get my edge rusher in Chris Braswell. And I get Brock Bowers at 14. And as long as I do right by him and get him out on the field and allow him to contribute right away, and I turn him into value instead of luxury, winning. Mr. Sheen himself would say it only that way. So that's the way that I look at this potential mock draft for the New Orleans Saints, leading off with Brock Bowers. I wanted to make sure I gave you a Brock Bowers mock draft. You deserve it. Especially with me coming in with bad camera quality today. Sorry, I'm out of town and my phone's not working with the thing. It's fine. But you got Brock Bowers, so there you go. That's the trade-off. All right, coming up next, I want to take a look at the New Orleans Saints trading up into the top 100 again and other ways that they could do that, or not other ways they could do that, but if they did that, what other pathways could they go? What else opens up for them? So we got a whole other mock draft coming up for you here in just a second as we continue on and wrap up this Mock Draft Monday episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Hey, how's your social battery doing these days, huh? Do you feel like you need to recharge? Or maybe you're like me and being around people is what recharges you. I'm out of town right now and I'm so grateful because I get to be around a whole bunch of people, around family, all this other stuff. We're going through a tough time, but it's really nice to be around family right now. Like that's kind of what I need. That's my way to recharge. So it's a really cool way to go about it. That's the way that I work. Do you know how your social battery works? Well, therapy can absolutely make sure that help you find the right answer so you can have the most successful social life that's available to you and that you're doing all the things that are going to keep that social life active and keep you feeling really, really good. That's what I love about therapy. It's not just about trying to figure out, quote unquote, what's wrong. Nothing's wrong. Let's help to reinforce some good habits first and foremost. So go and check them out, especially if you've been thinking about trying therapy out. You definitely want to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You can help find your social sweet spot today by visiting BetterHelp. Go to betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints trading up into the top 10 and also take a look at another edge rusher prospect in the second round that could be really, really good for the New Orleans Saints. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget, we are your team every day. So we'll be right back with you. John Hendricks and I, over at Second and Saints Tuesday night, are going to go through and take a look at our sort of tier list of team needs. So I'm going to give you my tier list of team needs in tomorrow morning's episode. So you have that information before you go into the Second and Saints episode to watch us kind of compare our notes. And of course, it's midweek fundamentals. So I'm going to get you started with a little bit of information on what could potentially be changing for the New Orleans Saints offense, what really you should be expecting with Clint Kubiak in and Pete Carmichael out, outside of course, more points. All right, coming up next, let's take a look at this mock draft. That was rude. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. But let's take it. It's true. It's true, though. Like, it's going to be a good thing for the New Orleans Saints, or at least it should, right? So what I want to look at next is this last mock draft here on Mock Draft Monday, where we trade up into the top 100. And also I go with an edge rusher that I've never talked about before on this show. And I'm always really excited to bring you new names on this show. And we're going to go through some familiar names and things like that here as well. So starting off at pick round 14. Round 1, pick 14. There it is. I got it. Round 1, pick 14. I've got the New Orleans Saints taking Troy Fautanu, the offensive lineman out of Washington. Now, I just selected him. It was between him and Fuaga. And look, this is what the rule is for me, okay? It's either Ole Fashanu, Troy Fautanu, Taliese Fuaga. It's one of the Fs, right? F, and F, unless Dallas Turner's on the board. That's my rule, right? That's the way that I do my mock drafts. That's the way that we've been doing them here all off season. Fautanu is a guy that kind of gives you good versatility over on the offensive side, right? Really, really, really good athleticism, premium footwork, really, which just kind of takes the cake, right? Like if you want a good offensive line, draft athletes on the offensive line. Troy Fautanu is an athlete. He, as Charles Barkley would say, is athletic. So you want to make sure that you have those guys. If you want to roll the dice on offensive line, going with the most athletic guys possible is the way to do it. And Fautanu is a guy that's had, like a relatively clean injury history. You can kind of trust him. He's been reliable. Let me say it that way. Not a clean injury history, but reliable. Hasn't allowed a ton of sacks throughout his time, if any. Hasn't really been credited with any, let's put it that way. And then gives you all that athleticism and the versatility. He might be your starting left tackle. Even though he's 6'3", he's sub 6'4", he's still got 34.5-inch arms. He's got what it takes to play tackle. So he could be your left tackle. He could be your right tackle if Ryan Ramczyk isn't ready to start the season. He could be your left guard if you want to end up moving James Hurst to one of those spots, right? Like there's a lot of different ways for the New Orleans Saints to go with that to make sure that they're getting their best five out. Fautanu helps you do that. Okay. And of course, the flow chart is Dallas Turner there? Yes. Dallas Turner. Is Dallas Turner there? No. Is Ole Fashanu there? Yes. Draft Fashanu. Is Dallas Turner there? No. Is Ole Fashanu there? No. is Troy Fautanu there? Yes, draft Troy Fautanu. And that's exactly what happened this time around. Okay, let's take a look at the second round here. I wanted to make sure I still got an edge rusher pretty early in this one. So I was able to go with a Penn State guy, Penn State edge rusher, not Chop Robinson, because he ended up going at the end of the first round. But what about Adisa Isaac? A guy that nobody really talks about at all, but that is extremely athletic. His 11.4 run stop rate shows you that he's very effective against the run. He's also effective as a pass rusher. Putting on some extra pounds would help. Came in at about 6'4", 247 pounds or so, but high RAS, which is about the athletic score relative to the history at his position, right? So super athletic guy. Came in with a sub 5 second 40, which is always nice for an edge rusher. Scored highly in speed, scored highly in explosion, like all those things from the combine, and just has production, right? Just good production. And you want that in these guys. So just a guy that we haven't really gotten the opportunity to talk about very much in Adisa Isaac, a guy that could be a solid selection for the New Orleans Saints in the second round. Okay, so let's talk about trading up into the third round. So this time when I traded up, I went with round 5 picks 170 and 175. So I went with the ones that are grouped a little bit more tightly together and a third round pick and was able to get up to 81. That's probably a little bit unreasonable unless the Seattle Seahawks are just kind of like, just kind of phoning it in for this draft maybe. But I mean, like, look, if I had to throw in a third, fifth round selection or one of my 2 6th round selections, I'd do it in a heartbeat to get up to 81. There, it gives me the opportunity to have access to guys like Malachi Corley, the wide receiver out of Western Kentucky, who I took in this draft. But it also puts you in position to go with guys potentially like Chris Jenkins, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, who's extremely disruptive. Michael Hall, another one that's really disruptive, but also stout against the run, kind of gives you that big body defensive tackle as well. So for this one, I ended up going with Malachi Corley because I like where things are going in terms of like adding more to the offense. And so that made sense to me. But hey, pick your poison at that point. Pick 150 in the 5th round. I went with my standard pick 150 selection, Theo Johnson, the tight end out of Penn State. I just think he would be such a good fit for New Orleans. And I think he would be a really good fit in this system. I think he's going to be a good playmaker. And he's a guy that when you draft him in the 5th round and he's not ready to go relearning the position at the NFL level, which is different. You're asked to do very different things at the NFL level than you're asked to do at college as a tight end. I'm not worried about the time that it takes for him to be ready in that case. Like, I'm good because he was a 5th round selection. At pick 168, Javon Foster, the offensive tackle out of Missouri. So I still get him. What if Troy Fautanu is somebody that I feel is going to be really good in the interior? So I want to play him at guard, but then I still need a tackle in place of Ryan Ramczyk. Boom, I've got a Javon Foster, right? So you just want to build up more to be able to kind of be ready for all those things. And let's not forget too that Ali Udoh had some of his worst seasons in Minnesota, being forced to play guard, but is a tackle by trait. So you also have the opportunity to be able to build there too. At pick 190, the halfback that I haven't come back to in a while, Kamani Vidal, the running back out of Troy. Look, one of my favorite draft prospects this year is Tyrone Tracy, the running back out of Purdue, because of what he has experience in as not only a running back, but also experience as a wide receiver in Iowa and all those other things. I want somebody that's going to be able to catch out of the backfield, continue to be able to kind of bring a little bit of, positionlessness and things like that. So that's where Tyrone Tracy comes in. At this selection, Kamani Vidal was just a good value selection. If he pans out, he pans out. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Not a big deal. At pick 199, I did go linebacker here. I went with Steele Chambers, the linebacker out of Ohio State. The Ohio State University, another special teams guy that could potentially come in and have some, add some good depth to the team. Steele Chambers as well. 36 Chambers. I mean, just a fantastic, like if he wore number 36 with the last name Chambers in the NFL, like, come on, like first team all name right here. Like, let's go. So we're all about that. We might have to do an all name draft one day, by the way, before this draft gets started. If you want that, let me know. And I will take time out of the show to do it. And then finally at pick 239, I had just missed Trey Taylor, my Air Force safety that I really, really like in this draft. One pick ahead. So I went with Kenny Logan Jr., the offense. I do that every time. The safety. I don't know what I think I'm going to be saying. The safety out of Kansas. Again, versatility, special teams, 7th round selection. Like, that's all that you want. So I like what I was able to do here. The one thing that I wish that I would have done differently maybe is go with the defensive tackle somewhere. So maybe if there was one at 190 that made more sense. Maybe I could have gone with Evan Anderson in the 7th round instead of safety Kenny Logan. I think that's where I came up short in this one, but I still like the idea of the way that everything came about. And honestly, like, it just goes to show you that even if you're leveraging several selections to move up inside the top 100, you have enough left behind to still address some of those big needs. Offensive tackle, defensive tackle, interior offensive lineman later in the draft if you want to, special teams, safety, wide receiver, all that. Like, you're still in a good position to address all those things. So I don't think that the New Orleans Saints, A, would be, but also B, need to be nervous or afraid to be aggressive in this year's draft if they want to. So, and I think that they should. I think that they should want to. All right, y'all, we appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day. Are the Pelicans back? We're so back. We're so back. Oh my gosh, what a ridiculous game by Zion Williamson. If you want to hear more about it, make sure you go and check out Jake Madison over at Locked On Pelicans. And of course, Haley Van Lith transferring, Angel Reese going to the pros. What's next for LSU women's basketball? And of course, LSU football right around the corner as well. Caroline Fenton over Locked On LSU has you covered. We appreciate you very much. As always, make it Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.